All right, welcome. We're live. Great. Good morning, everyone. I am Ryan McGurk. I am with RSM. I'm our Industrials Audit Policy Leader. Just quickly, RSM is proud to sponsor the 2021 Manufacturing Report that you all have. And you know, we're the first choice advisors. We pride ourselves to be first choice advisors to the middle market through audit, tax, and consulting. And I'm happy to be joined here with an esteemed panel. So I'll quickly introduce them. We won't go too far into our bios as they're all in the pamphlets that you guys have. So sitting here, we have Grant Robinson of Stanley Industries, Michele Etzel of National Direct, and then Santiago of CompassMSP. So welcome. Thank you for joining me. I think we're going to cover some of the themes and topics that have been identified in the manufacturing report, and clearly were already talked about in the keynote addressed a lot of these. So we'll look at them from, you know, some of the maybe supply chain vertical, but also, you know, small, middle market, and then also from the large perspective as well. So we'll jump right into it. So the first thing, and clearly there was questions on this too, was workforce. I'd be remiss if we didn't just touch on COVID a little bit and just hear maybe, Michele, if you want to start us off, what you've seen and how you had to quickly pivot and adapt to ensure that you're still able to meet your demands internally from an operational standpoint, your customers' demands, while balancing, you know, health and safety and kind of driving, you know, our workforce in the state to continue to be engaged.
Well, fortunately, we were able to all continue to operate, and in our business, because everybody had to stay home, we're direct mail print. All of a sudden, we became pretty interesting because everybody was excited to go to their mailbox. So we saw a little bit of an uptick, which meant that we could do something that we made a decision to do in the very beginning of COVID, was go out and keep everyone in our company employed. We made that a point. We told them it might be tight, but we're going to make sure everyone stays employed. So what we did thereafter is kind of get everyone on board with the PPP, you know, modify shifts, move people around so that they were socially distances, a lot of cleaning, a lot of touching things up regularly. So your normal shift might be an 8-hour shift or even 10 hours. You had to build in time in the schedule for additional cleaning so that the next operator could come on board and feel comfortable. Air filters, we did everything probably everyone else has done, but we did it very quickly and pivoting very quickly. Sure.
And I think, as we've all probably experienced, coming out of the pandemic, if hopefully we are coming out of the pandemic, the workforce themselves have kind of rethought how they go to work, and we can see that trend in the manufacturing report, the struggle for finding talent and technology-centric employees, especially in the manufacturing sector. There is a need for that talent out there, but there seems to be a very limited supply. So Graham, you know, what are some of the things that Stanley's looked at, you know, to kind of maybe rethink the value proposition that you maybe offer your employees and prospective employees to find that talented and technology-centric manufacturer?
Yeah, excellent question, Ryan, and thanks for having us here, the CBIA panel and opportunity. The issue is a very complex one, quite frankly. And just as a personal anecdote, I've been with Stanley Black & Decker roughly a year and a half. In the last 12 months, I've had over 100 plant visits. I have 61 factories, of which 28 are in the US. I've tried to work clandestinely in our factories. I've spent a lot of time in the factories. So it's one which is near and dear to my heart. And I think there are many, many factors which are taking place all at the same time, which is resulting in a very, very difficult environment. You have a nationalism which is taking place throughout. You have a rapidly aging workforce. In my business, for example, almost 40% of the people who work in the factory are older than 55 years old. You have a very, very complex supply chain, obviously a lot of shortages, and an environment which is very, very stressful overall. all of this adds up to a situation which makes it very, very difficult to attract, to maintain employees in this environment. So we're doing a number of things. And it starts, quite frankly, with trying to ensure that we maintain the people that we have. And it starts at the top with empathetic leadership, making sure that we provide an environment which is acceptable and suitable to all. The environment has changed a lot in the last year. Getting people to work in the office is one thing, much less getting people to work in a factory. It's much more challenging than before. So we're doing a number of things to relate to that. But the part that I am particularly focused on in our situation is the plant manager. The plant manager is one of those professions which has been forgotten in many, many situations. And if you go to our average factory, they don't know who I am. They don't know who my boss is, but they can probably tell you what car the plant manager drives, or can probably tell you his or her spouse's name. So how do we reinvigorate the plant manager? How do we put in place more training? How do we put in place a career for those in the plants that transcend the plants? Because increasingly, most of the innovation and the ideas come from within those four walls of the factory. And it's our job as leaders to tap that. So I think we're dealing with a very, very complex and rapidly changing landscape that we have to be thoughtful about as to how we address. And just jumping in may not get us the result we want, but having a comprehensive approach to it with certainly restricting the amount of attrition, attracting people, attacking new talent bases to get people is the comprehensive solution that we're looking at Stanley Black & Decker.
Sure. And Ari, you talk to a lot of folks, especially through your Made in America podcast. A little plug there. I guess what do you see and hear? In terms of how people are rethinking, like Graham said, there's an aging workforce. Looking at that younger generation, and they're going to have a total different value proposition and what they're looking for from a prospective employer to get them in the door. So if you can expand what you're seeing and what you're hearing.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ryan. I think we're in an interesting position just because we're at the intersection of technology, which is so much to do in the workforce. I think what's under-discussed so much is what Graham brought up, which is we think a lot about what the hands are doing. Am I on-site? Am I off-site? Am I using digital transformational technology with an automatic torque wrench, or am I doing it myself? Am I looking at 2D drawings, or am I looking at 3D drawings? But the reality is, we have to win the hearts and minds if we want the hands to follow. And that's where I do agree a ton with Graham that getting some training for leaders to help them understand how to lead. The strategies that we use to engage our employees when they were on site or with the old technology, that needs to change. And it's not the people in the C-suite that are really gonna drive it at the ground level. It's the middle managers, and we need to commit and invest in some of that EQ training and some of that relationship training. Help people understand that you can't run your normal meeting over Zoom and expect it to be as engaging. You need to learn new techniques. We need to help those leaders boost that, and it's critical. If we're gonna attract the generations of the future, they're gonna expect to come to work and at least have the technology they have at home. Your bedroom can't be more technically advanced than your workplace if you want people to be engaged. And so I think, minimum teenage bedroom technology needs to be the bedrock of every company.
Sure.
We're
Go ahead,
doing
Michele.
something interesting because because manufacturing doesn't seem to be as sexy for the younger generation. So you want to bring them in. So we're partnering in the younger generation with some of our longer term team members. And we're kind of targeting it as a mentorship, but also a reverse mentorship program, where we're asking the younger members to make sure that they help the older members of our community or our team, our employees, to be kind of re-educated and updated on what's going on, and they're getting excited and invigorated, and the younger members are getting excited and invigorated because they're now being mentored and they actually have a progress and a path. So I think it's really important that we get out there and we tell people that this is still a really great place to go to work. But it's not just about going to work, it's about having a path. You're not just using your hands, but you have the ability to go from using your hands to a supervisor, to something else, and maybe becoming that plant manager, all with the mentorship of somebody who's been around. Because let's face it, they can't do it, well, most can't do it till they're 90, right? But some would like to, but they also enjoy talking to the younger employees.
Yeah, and Graham, you made a great point, and it goes into Ari too. It's just showing that empathy as leaders too, and that the people that they see on an everyday basis from a leadership perspective, and regardless if it's manufacturing or anything, it's how do you as an employer create a stickiness that your employees want to come back to, I think, right? And right?
Yeah, I mean, McKinsey just published an article a couple of weeks ago. It's called The Great Attrition versus the Great Attraction. And if you haven't read it, I encourage you all to look at it, because it's pretty illuminating. Like McKinsey does, they have a 2x2, one which is what employers think and what employees think. And you see a significant disconnect between what employees think is important and what the employers think is important. So what employers think is important is, oh, well, people want more money. People want to be promoted. And that's probably true in some situations. What employees think is important is, I want to feel valued. I want my supervisor to respect me. I want to have an environment which I like coming to work. And I suspect if they did that same survey 2 years ago, probably those trends would be there, but it is much more amplified than it is today. So we're dealing with a really different environment. And our ability to adapt as employers in general, as those focused on manufacturing, as those in Connecticut, is really what will separate us from the rest.
Sure.
I just want to pull on what Graham said, because it's just really pulling on something really important there, which is, we talk to a lot of companies, including our own, that think a lot about employee NPS or employee happiness surveys and employee scores. But what we think about more, and what I'm trying to drive some rethinking, which is stop measuring the output you want, measure the inputs that are going to drive that output. Yeah. And so you can juice up your employee NPS by having, barbecue Fridays or, maybe do a round of raises, but that's a short-term sugar high. If we really want to do the work that's going to make our businesses successful, we need to invest in our employees. We need to measure the things that matter, which is, do they understand the impact they can make by working here? Do they understand where their career can grow by investing their time here? If we think about it from that perspective, we can generate a lot more engaged employees, a lot better return for the business, and we're not going to rely on those short-term sugar highs that don't actually drive value.
And one other thing also, it's educating the employees so that they realize that what they do doesn't just affect them and their specific department. So we'll actually pick people up and put them in another department for a month and rotate them. It's hard. You have to work hard because you're training and you're teaching, but that's also part of this mentorship program so that they can see what they do and how it impacts something else. And then they feel valued because they understand that what they're doing and how it impacts someone else in another department and what they're doing.
Sure. Not to pivot too much, we'll come back to finding employees and maybe what the state and the legislators can do to help that. But workforce isn't just an issue getting manufacturing in our factories, but the workforce on a macro scale has really impacted supply chain, which we can all read in the news every day, or you can log on and there's something about supply chain constraints and so forth. So I wanted to get into first, maybe Graham, what are you seeing in your business? How are you guys building resilience, maybe through technology that Sikorsky was talking a little bit about too, to kind of just build that resilient supply chain to make sure that you minimize the risk of disruption in your business?
Well, it's a challenging issue all across the board. And we are not exempt, like most companies are. And it spans the globe. It spans the globe in terms of us directly as a manufacturer, in terms of getting raw materials. It spans the globe in terms of our customers. We have a significant customer base in automotive, which clearly there's a big problem with semiconductors. But we're doing a number of things to gain more visibility. So we use technology to gain much more visibility to where our pallets are, what pallets are coming at what point in time. We use technology to better understand demand so that we can plan better. We use technology all across in all aspects to build more resilience. And it has helped. It has certainly helped. But the reality is that the environment that we are in now is more challenging than at any point in time in recent history. And if we feel it at the top, those all the way throughout the organization feel it at an order of magnitude more than we feel it. So building resilience is important for me, yes. It's important for my team. But what's more important for me is to figure out how I manage that with the teams all throughout the organization. And that is where the job of a manager really comes in. And I think Ari made a fantastic point, which is not just look at the outputs, look at the inputs. This actually goes back to basic lean. Look back at your processes, measure your processes, and understand what is happening, and that will influence the output. And it goes for all aspects, including the supply chain.
Sure.
I would be provocative in saying it's not just about technology, it's also about building partnerships when we're all trying to find supply. If you've built a partnership over the years and times are tough, I would bet that that supplier is going to find something for you relative to the other suppliers that you might not have built a nice, strong partnership with. And we had that example earlier when that gentleman stood up and said thank you to Sikorsky.
Yeah.
So in order to continue to sustain these supply chain tightening, you have to continue to build your supplier relationships. And obviously, in this particular case, in our case, because we're printers, paper's a commodity. And there's a lot of ships off seas that are not making their way here. So not only do you have to do that, we found that you have to build your inventory, and we've taken the steps to build inventory so that we can be flexible enough. And in our industry, we actually have seen people who have not done that, and we have competitors who've come to us to say, can you do this? Because we don't have the industry. And we're watching our industry shrink a little bit because some people are saying, I'm done. But I think its partnerships are very important too.
Sure. You know, I think in the manufacturing report, not to rattle stats off, but the Institute of Supply said that the average lead time of production materials has increased to 92 days, which is the largest that it's been since they've tracked it since 1987. And commitment lead time for capital expenditures and getting that equipment and technology on the factory floor is over 150 days at this point. Some of the largest since the 80s as well. So that just adds to the challenges. Ari, you know, what are you seeing kind of for some of the companies that you work with? You know, how are they evolving and using technology to kind of maybe drill into the insight in their supply chain to kind of maybe help minimize some of that risk and lead time and ultimately, you know, meet their customers' demands on time?
I mean, you try and use digital planning, you try and project, you know, we're talking to people who are using sort of orders and trending to try and project what they need to try and maybe beef up some inventory. But it's hard. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. And it's not just for new technology, but the repairs is where it's now starting to get, and it's down to some basics. You know, a personal story, the air conditioning unit in my office that serves the area I'm in, we lost a board. And we can't get it. We're just waiting for this thing to come in. So it's tight everywhere. I think you want to use your resource planning as best you can to try and order ahead and leverage that information. I mean, information is power.
Sure, and Graham, I'm sure you see this a lot too, and Ari, you want to use technology, and there's a lot of data out there on your manufacturing floor, and it's not just about using technology to describe what's going on or what's happened, but how do you use technology to be more prescriptive and have foresight and to limit some of that risk. So maybe you guys can speak to just some of the, advances in technology, but then there's also challenges which we can get into from a cybersecurity standpoint, which Sikorsky was kind of explaining as well.
Yeah, well, we use artificial intelligence pretty extensively throughout, but in particular our business where we have customers such as John Deere and others which demand is influenced by a number of macro factors. So we do a modeling as to what are the combination of those factors and how would that influence their demand and consequently our supply to them. And that helps. That has significantly improved what we've done from a productivity perspective on what we do in terms of getting product to them on time. And we'll continue to do that. So certainly technology has helped in all aspects, from the supply side to the demand side. and has helped us materially and will continue to help us as we go through this.
Sure. And Michele, how do you guys take that manufacturing data and turn it into actionable kind of information?
Well, we receive data. There's so much data that we receive that you have to summarize it and kind of react, but it's a matter of teaching the people on the floor how to look at what they're doing and how to look at projections, see where they are relative to their goal at the end of the day. But it's not just that, you're looking at every shift, every machine, every person. And then candidly, it's really just about being flexible. If a machine goes down, you have to pivot. I think this whole pandemic has been all about, we talk about resiliency and we talk about flexibility, but I think those that have had the ability to pivot really quick and kind of swing and sway are those that are staying alive really well. And I think it's a mentality of just having that. Looking at the data is great. You can get sucked into the data and you can really, you can drown in it. It's a matter of summarizing it and kind of pulling out these key points. And obviously KPIs everybody talks about. And then really kind of focusing in on that and educating the people to focus in on that. And that kind of gives everyone a goal.
Sure. And as the manufacturing floor becomes more and more paperless and the world becomes more paperless.
Not in our place. We keep going paperless. No.
But
sorry, folks.
A better way to say it is as companies
more
digital collect more data or realize that.
Sorry, Brian.
No worries. I appreciate that, keeping me honest here. I guess there's always been data on the manufacturing floors. Technology is now allowing companies to access that and understand it and stuff. But there comes a lot of risks with that, whether it's cyber or how do we train our workforce to understand that data. So Ari, what are some of the solutions that you've seen companies take? Maybe from a training standpoint and best practices, but also awareness, cybersecurity, and it starts the front line, as I always see it, is their people, right? And knowing what to do with that data and what not to do with it from a cyber, in a security standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's super critical. I mean, I don't think anyone in this room hasn't read about or heard about, a horror story. We live those and get calls, regularly for places that weren't taking the right steps and need to get fixed up, as it were. And it's a dangerous world out there, no doubt about it. And people are trying to take advantage of, and in part because of the pandemic, the increasing work from home. You heard from Sikorsky, 5 to 10%, up to 30%. I'm sure everyone in this room had more people working at home in the last year than ever before. And with that comes flexibility, but also comes risk. And so how do we manage that risk? And I think there's two components. One is having the right technology tools. But Ryan, you hit on what I perceive to be the weakest link and the most important link, which is our people. How can we help our people understand to avoid some of the real pitfalls and risks out there, social engineering, email interference. Some of it's not even technology related. One of the things we've been trying to encourage our clients is to have the right controls in place. I mean, we've seen in manufacturing in particular a very pernicious attack where they'll target manufacturing equipment suppliers, and a bad actor will get onto that company's email system and just sit there and wait. And they'll look for an order, they'll see the order coming through, everything is completely legitimate. Right after the PO is issued, they'll get on the system, they'll redirect all the emails and send from the actual business's email new wiring on their letterhead with a perfect match signature. You got to pick up the phone and call. You got to go a little bit more old school. Maybe send a letter, but you got to pick up the phone and call.
Or more than one.
More than yeah, that's right. But you need to pick up and call a known good number and validate that type of training. There's very short money, high impact things like phishing testing. Like regular training to update people and just keep them aware. I'll give this one last thing and we can move to something else. But I think, phishing testing, simulating phishing attacks from yourself to your own employees. I always describe it as the speed trap on the highway. I have a bit of a heavy foot. I'm sure everyone here drives the speed limit, but occasionally I'm going more than the speed limit. And you see a police car. Sometimes they're parked, sometimes they're just driving, and you slow down, right? You think to yourself, whoa, I got to pay attention to my surroundings. I think if we're doing that with phishing tests, which helps people to slow down, most people don't mean to click on the errant email, they're just moving so fast. And so having that opportunity to kind of keep them, that muscle memory high impact to save the business. And I mean, the last thing I'll say is don't think because you're a smaller business, people don't care. That there's not companies out there that are trying to get into your systems. They don't think about the size of the system. They write these mass programs, and they're just looking for the weakest link. So everyone needs to be safe and aware. It's hugely, hugely important.
Yeah, what you're talking about is a lot of education for
Education.
people. Education and probably cutting out the esoteric, the unnecessary that might get in first. And then the bigger problem is when they start masking what looks like your own.
Sure. And we heard from this morning too, and Graham, you probably see this in your business too. It's not just the target on the large manufacturers, but all the way down the vertical in the supply chain. Even the suppliers that are 25, 50 people, might be the most vulnerable, but there could be critical information all the way up to the OEM or a company your size like Stanley and so forth. So I'm sure there's awareness and some prerequisites that you guys threw from a control standpoint with your suppliers as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, like with most large companies or most companies nowadays, it's the supplier link that's the one which is the most vulnerable, quite frankly. And in that particular context, I think we spoke about establishing strategic relationships with your suppliers, not just in difficult times like today, but in general. And that's where that type of partnership really comes in handy. Because you want to actually put in place not just systems that you have, but the systems that you have with your suppliers as much as possible. And that requires a partnership to do. So getting to that level of collaboration with them where they are as vested as you are in ensuring that the controls are in place on their end, even though they may just be a 2 or 3 person operation, which we have a ton of, quite frankly, in our business. Yeah. And making sure that that takes place throughout is really the art of managing throughout this. And this requires, as you said before, people, Larry. It fundamentally comes down to people. The processes that we have in place certainly help, but ensuring that we have the people in place who manage this on a continuous basis is really, really critical.
Sure. We've talked a lot about risk and things, workforce and this, but there is a lot of optimism in the manufacturing report. So I want to pivot to that. I think over 50% of the respondents expected their business to grow in the next year, which is fantastic news considering where everyone was a year and a half ago. So, specific to the state of Connecticut, Michele, what do you see, as some of the positives that we all experience as being manufacturers here in the state, that the state's been doing well and fostering a positive environment?
Our location.
Yeah.
Our location allows us to be centrally located. We have cities within 2 hours. We're on the East Coast. We have a ton of opportunity. The downside is we can get locked up. Transportation, there's an awful lot of trucks that need to get through on that 2-lane highway sometimes, and that might slow things down. But I think the opportunity that we have here is there's a large population. We're close to our people. We're close to our clients. That's really important.
And just the size of Connecticut, too, allows, there's a lot of connections between the public sector, the private sector, and educational institutions. So, Graham, maybe what are some of the things that you like to see kind of in the future, from more of a collaboration standpoint, and maybe what is Stanley doing, to drive some of that, again, this comes back to the workforce, and how do we get, driving awareness and getting that technology, the future of a technology-centric manufacturer into our shop floors to keep the lights on and driving and supporting that growth that everyone's optimistic about.
Yeah, we're equally as optimistic about the future at Stanley Black & Decker. And one of the reasons I joined Stanley Black & Decker and certainly moved to the Connecticut area was because of our commitment to the community. I've worked for many companies and I've not seen anything close to what we do in terms of the interaction and the passion and the genuine commitment that we have top down to the community and to developing the next set of leaders from the community. And we have a number of things that we're doing. We have the latest is our Makers Month program, in which we're investing over $50 million to put together the next set of manufacturing leaders throughout the community of Connecticut. We're doing that over the next couple of years, and we're doing that on a continuous basis as we go throughout. But it transcends that. I give a practical example. Marty Gray, who is here from Stanley Black & Decker, but wears a number of hats. I was at a forum with him last night of someone who had a book launch, and he was someone who was in prison for 10 years and came out of prison 5 years ago and wrote a book on poetry. I don't know how difficult it is to write an email, much less a book on poetry. And when he spoke, I have many degrees, and he spoke with such a level of intellect that it exceeded probably many people or most people I've met in any form of life that I've been through. And he went through many programs to focus on manufacturing and developed a manufacturing skill set, and he'll do that and create many more people like that. But we have a real opportunity here, and it is a genuine passion that we have at Stanley, and not just Stanley. Many of the companies here have, which is one of the things which is unique about Connecticut, in that we have an organization and organizations like this where we can make a difference, and we can make a difference in people's lives. And manufacturing is the perfect vehicle to do this. Without manufacturing, that young man last night probably would not be where he was right now. And he's probably in the 5th inning of his journey. You'll hear a lot more about him in the future. But we have an opportunity to make a difference which transcends anything else. And few other states have the opportunity we have with the proximity, the location, and the types of companies that we have. And now with the background and the tailwinds that we're going to get from the economy, now is our time. Now is our time.
Sure. And Michele, from your perspective, a privately held manufacturer here in Connecticut, what are you seeing that the state, the legislature, what kind of policies, do you see that are maybe working, but that you're hopeful for, in the near term or future from the state?
I'd like to see the trades become a little bit higher priority because I think technology is important, but we still have certain things where we still need our hands, and we still have people that need to get out there and work. And they have to be exciting, and we have to entice the next generation to want to get into it. And then we have to bring the current generation that is retiring and help them to see the wonderful path that's available. So if there's a way that we can kind of do that, that would be really important. And I also think that relative to our business, our competition is located in states where there's costs that are much lower than they are here. So if there's anything that the state or the legislature can do to drive costs down for manufacturers, I don't think anyone in the room here would disagree with that. Would be wonderful, because if your competition is in the Midwest, the cost of living might be different. So how do we compete against other states or down south? That would make us a little bit more, have that same advantage.
Sure. Comes back again to that, how do we offer that value proposition to a prospective employee in the Northeast? Because there is certainly a different cost of living, but there's a lot of political factors that come into play that we won't dive too deep on. But Ari, you seem like you have some thoughts.
No, I think from a positivity perspective, we've got people in leadership in state government who care and who want to make things better in a positive way. And what I've been seeing, and I was lucky enough to have Governor Lamont on the podcast, had a chance to talk to him, and one of the things that struck me in a really positive way was his willingness and desire to listen to experts in the field to help drive change there. And that's really critically important. Now being the CEO of business with offices in multiple different states, there's challenges everywhere, but to have leadership here that wants to do things, to invest in workforce, to invest in having a chief manufacturing officer who can deliver information about our industry directly to where decisions are made to help make better decisions, very strong. And I also am fortunate enough to sit on the Board of Regents for Higher Education for the state of Connecticut. And I can tell you at that board, there is conversation all the time about investing in trade and manufacturing. People have been to Nantucket and have seen what they've done there in terms of the Advanced Manufacturing Center. It's extremely impressive. And that's being spread throughout the state college system. It is a huge focus to drive training and education in that area. These things take a while to ramp up. They were taken down over a long period of time, and they can't be turned on overnight. But there is energy and effort being talked about at the highest levels about how we can help people to see that there is a great career path in manufacturing. And go back to where we started on workforce. What I'm hearing from most people, what they want is to make an impact. They want to think what they do every day matters. And the manufacturing that we do here in Connecticut, it matters. We make things that matter. And so there's a huge opportunity to help talk to people who want to have a career and a life of doing things that matter, and we can help them find that path. I think it's a tremendous opportunity. So many people are willing to work at it, and having organizations like CBIA and events like this to bring people together is so powerful. And being in such a small state where we can have so much collaboration in such a short distance to travel, I think it's a huge asset, and we need to think about how we can leverage that.
Yeah, so I see, what I'm hearing is continued investment, from the capital down on, even just the vocational and training and, getting the younger people, they're seeing those acceleration centers and they're getting in there. So when they jump into the workforce, a lot of these companies, Stanley, everyone's going to be full swing industry 4.0 and all different types of, whether it's automation and bots and AI, that they're comfortable and they're excited to dive into that technology and, like you said, create something that's special, right? And have a tangible product at the end of the day. And
there's a lot of places out there, kind of helping to make that happen in a lot of different areas. You mentioned the technical trade schools in Connecticut. They're doing a great job. I talked about, the community colleges and other colleges that have programs. There's Stanley Black & Decker and private manufacturers all throughout that are doing apprenticeship programs. The state's been supporting that. And there's tons of retraining programs. I mean, I think about Cindy Zoldi and Waterbury and the MASK program where they're helping people kind of train to get into manufacturing. And some of that is second chance opportunities, which I think is a really untapped market, or just people that are looking to get into manufacturing or find a career and showing them this new technology. So, I mean, it's out there, Ryan, tons and tons of opportunity if we're willing to reach out and grab it.
Sure. So we have a few minutes left. So just to kind of maybe recap, I'll let you each just give your thoughts on like where does the state of manufacturing go for here? What do you see? We've talked a little bit about the optimism. So maybe Michele, if you want to kick us off, is what are you excited about as a leader in a manufacturing company here in Connecticut, and where can we go from here?
We're excited because we brought a new piece of equipment online throughout COVID, which had its difficulties because when you're bringing a new piece of equipment and your manufacturer might be overseas, you obviously can't bring people in to support it. But what's exciting about that is that there is growth. And we look forward to seeing, we're looking forward to a positive fourth quarter, a positive 2022. And I think that there's a lot of resiliency. And I think that those that have really stuck it out and understand the value of partnerships and reaching out to the community. Building those trade schools is great, but all of us are looking for people right now. So I think it's a matter of, and I'm not discounting that at all, please, but I think it's a matter of reaching out to the local community and also making them get excited about what you're doing, because they might know of your business in the area, but they don't know really what you do. If I talk to you about direct mail, you kind of know what it is, but you don't really know those items that you're reading that really are impactful, whether it's a newsletter from your health organization or a newsletter from your insurance company. Well, those things qualify. And now all of a sudden people realize it because during COVID, that's what they were reading. That's what they got. So I think it's a matter of like really not only energizing people around you, but kind of pulling people in and letting them see the positive too.
Sure, sure. So Graham, from your perspective, I'm sure the pandemic has accelerated all our businesses, and the ones that are coming out of it surviving are hopefully going to rebound and accelerate even further. So maybe talk about what optimism you have for the state, and how Stanley is going to play into that as well.
Well, I'm super excited about our future. We benefited quite a bit in many parts of Stanley Black & Decker from the pandemic. Many of you stayed at home, and fortunately for us, many of you decided to do something in your home. You fixed up some garage, you added a new building, you did something. So we're thankful for that. But we're not just a company that supports construction. In my business, we have significant exposure to aerospace, to automotive, to oil and gas, to a broad range of industries. And we see a significant resurgence taking place in those areas. Aerospace taking a little bit longer, but certainly pointing in the right direction. And we certainly see next year being more positive in automotive. But that's interesting. But what I'm actually the most excited about is how I started. I started by listing a number of challenges that we face in the workplace. The aging workforce, nationalism, getting people coming back to the office, much less a factory. And what I see is a movement from resilience to agility. So I see us as a company and many others adapting quickly to this workplace. So we're really changing policies. We're looking at doing things differently. Should we still have marijuana as a screening policy? I don't know, maybe not. Should we look at second chance a lot more? Oh, maybe not. Actually, if that person last night wanted to work, I'd have hired him. If he wanted a full-time job, I'd have hired him on the spot. So we're really, really changing our paradigm as to what it means and how we interact with people in the workplace and what is important to them. And to me, that ultimately is the reason for optimism, because that's how we get to the hearts of the people that we need in the factories.
Sure. It's almost providing a holistic experience for the employees, and how do they come to work feeling fulfilled every day, that they're contributing to the greater mission of not only the company they work for, but the local economy in the state as well. So any parting thoughts, Ari?
Look, I mean, my fellow panelists ably kind of wrapped it up. So the thing I would just end on is I think that as we are moving into a new environment where highly engineered products and highly engineered approaches, high technology, digital transformation, model-based definition, and all those things come into play, that high technology, the move from brawn to brains, I think Connecticut is in a great position to take advantage of that move. The panelists have talked about it. Stanley Black & Decker is clearly deeply engaged in it. The state's willing to invest in it. Colin's going around, giving us all the support that we need to do it. And we've got great organizations like CBIA and CCAT and others that are helping take advantage of these new technologies. So wherever there's change, there's opportunity. The change that's happening now puts Connecticut in a great place to take advantage of those opportunities, but we have to go out and do the work. We have to take those steps forward to grab the brass ring and run with it. And if we do, sky's the limit.
And I would say one thing, and not get complacent, because if our state wants to do well, we have to not forget that so do the other states that are pulling people away from here, and that we still need to address the issues that affect manufacturers so that we can keep people here and make it more exciting for people to come in.
Sure. Yeah, it's more competitive than ever.
Yeah.
But competition is what drives and hopefully helps companies strive, to be profitable and stuff like that. So competition is welcomed. It's a good thing, right?
Absolutely.
So with that said, I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you, CBIA, for giving us the opportunity to come up here. So hopefully you can all dive into the report. If you have any questions for the panelists, come find us during the networking or afterwards. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Ryan.
Nice job, Ryan.
Thanks for being
Thanks, Ryan, Graham, Michele, Ari. I could listen to these guys all day. We should create a Connecticut podcast to hear best practices at CBIA. But hey, tune into Ari's podcast, Made in America with Ari Santiago. Do it yourself with Stanley Black & Decker tools, and make sure you go down to your mailbox and and get those paper products from Michele and keep all the folks happy. Ryan, thanks a lot. That was great.